The mechanic had long forgotten how to cry, until a boy in ragged shoes walked into his garage, holding a broken toy car in one hand, and a broken heart in the other. What began as a simple repair turned into a journey of rediscovery, pain, healing, and a question no adult ever expects to be asked. What this child truly wanted wasn't a fixed toy, but a father. And what the mechanic found, was something he thought he'd lost forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, share with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe our channel Kindness Talks for more real-life inspired emotional stories. The clock struck 6:02 p.m., and Mason wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag, closing the hood of a pickup truck that had given him trouble all afternoon. He was ready to shut the garage for the day, tired, sore, and quietly drowning in the silence that always came once the engine stopped roaring. The sound of small footsteps interrupted his routine. Click-clack. Pause. Click-clack. He looked up, and there he was. A small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, stood at the edge of the garage. His face was thin, cheeks slightly sunken, and his clothes were worn and oversized, as though handed down too many times. In his hand, he clutched a red toy car, the wheel dangling off by a string of plastic. His other hand trembled nervously by his side. Mason raised an eyebrow. "Hey, kid. You lost?" The boy hesitated, then walked in, step by careful step, eyes flicking between the floor and the mechanic's face. He stopped a few feet away from Mason, held out the toy car with both hands, and spoke in a soft, broken voice. "Sir. I don't have a daddy, could you fix this?" Mason blinked. It felt like the air had been punched out of his lungs. Not, "Can you fix my toy?" Not, "Do you know how to fix cars?" But, "I don't have a daddy." He kneeled slowly, taking the toy gently from the boy's hands. The car was cheap, probably from a dollar store, but the way the boy held it, it was more than a toy. "What's your name, kid?" "Eli," the boy replied, barely above a whisper. "You came here alone?" Eli nodded. Mason didn't know what compelled him, but he sat cross-legged on the garage floor and laid the broken toy on his lap. "All right, Eli. Let's see what we can do." As he worked, Mason noticed the boy watching him with wide, hopeful eyes, not so much on the toy, but on him. The kind of eyes that searched for something, maybe safety, maybe connection, maybe something lost. The toy wasn't hard to fix. A quick adjustment, a tiny screw, and the wheel popped back into place. "There," Mason said, handing it back. "Good as new." Eli smiled, a rare, genuine smile, and held the car tightly to his chest. But then he looked down again and asked, "Do you fix other stuff too?" Mason paused. "Like what?" "My mom cries every night," Eli whispered. "She says she's trying her best. But I hear her ask God if it's enough." "Do you fix moms too?" Mason's hands dropped to his knees. This boy wasn't here for a toy. He was here because he had no one else. Mason led Eli to a small stool and gave him a soda. He called the number scribbled inside Eli's coat. A tired, breathless woman named Sarah picked up, panicked and teary. When she arrived 20 minutes later, she hugged her son so tightly Mason had to look away. "I'm so sorry," she said, wiping her face. "He's been asking about his father a lot lately. I told him we don't need fixing. But I guess." She stopped herself and looked up at Mason, her eyes lingering. "Thank you." But Mason said nothing. Because Sarah didn't know, he needed fixing too. His own son had died 5 years ago. His marriage crumbled after that. And for the longest time, he'd pushed everyone away, thinking he deserved the silence. But that little boy had walked into his shop and shattered the silence with one sentence. The next morning, Mason woke up with something stirring inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't understand it at first, but he found himself arriving at the garage an hour early. At 8:03 a.m., the bell above the garage door jingled. It was Eli. With a piece of toast in one hand, and the same toy car in the other. "Mr. Mason," he said cheerfully. The wheel came off again. It hadn't, not really. Mason could see it was still on. But he smiled anyway. "Well, then. We better fix it again." And so it began. Every day, for the next 3 weeks, Eli showed up after school. Sometimes with a broken toy, sometimes with a made-up excuse. Mason began keeping snacks in the garage. He taught Eli how to hold a wrench, how to check oil, how to listen to the sound of a working engine. They laughed. Talked. Repaired. Sarah noticed the change in her son. He smiled more, asked fewer questions about a father, and slept without waking up in tears. But what she didn't expect was the change in Mason. He started fixing more than cars. He started helping neighbors again. Volunteering to tune up old engines for free. One day, after Mason dropped Sarah's car at her place, she invited him in for coffee. The silence was awkward at first, but eventually, words flowed. Shared grief, shared pain. Sarah confessed how Eli's father had walked out before he was even born. "How do you explain abandonment to a child?" she asked, eyes glistening. Mason didn't answer. He simply looked across the hallway, where Eli was asleep with the toy car still clutched in his hand. Days turned into weeks. One Saturday afternoon, Eli arrived with a folded drawing. He handed it to Mason and grinned. It was a stick figure picture. A boy holding hands with a man wearing a hat and oil-stained pants. Underneath it, scrawled in messy handwriting. "Thank you for fixing my heart." Mason choked. He turned away so Eli wouldn't see the tears pooling in his eyes. But Eli hugged him from behind. "You don't have to be my daddy," he said. "Just don't leave." 1 month later, Mason stood outside a school playground, watching Eli's class perform a Father's Day skit. He didn't want to come. He didn't feel he had the right. But Sarah insisted. Eli had reserved him a front row seat. When Eli walked on stage, he didn't hold a sign like the other kids. Instead, he walked up to the mic and said, "I didn't have a daddy. But then, I met someone who taught me that being a dad isn't about blood, it's about fixing the pieces others leave broken." He pointed to Mason. "He's not just a mechanic. He fixed my toy, my heart, and my home." Everyone turned to Mason. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. But he smiled. Because in fixing that little boy's car, the boy had fixed him too. Sometimes, we walk into someone's life thinking we're the healer, but it's often our own broken pieces that get mended. Kindness can't bring back what's gone, but it can help us find what we thought we'd lost forever: purpose, connection, and love.